Ready?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I'll cut you off.
No, come on.
Maybe I'll start it right there. Alrighty then, we're going to talk about religion today. And so this is on, it looks like page 59, Religious Trends. In this. So as you can see, this is 2 pages. Got the background of the Reformation, then the Reformation itself and the religious wars. We'll briefly go through that. That's already been discussed quite thoroughly. So then we'll go on, and we'll be discussing the impact of science on religion, and then 18th and then 19th and 20th century religious trends. So hopefully we'll get to that pretty soon. Because usually when we're thinking about religion, we're thinking about, in this course, the things that happened a long time ago, the Reformation and the wars of religion. And as we noted, 1648 and the Peace of Westphalia is sort of the beginning of a change in the focus of the political order. Religion is much less of a central issue. And warfare after that will be much more focused on the political balance of power. Basically, states attempting to balance the power of other states in order to protect themselves. No longer will states feel a special cause of religion or feel like they need to defend people in a region because of religion. Not completely, but somewhat. We see that sort of those religious connections decline. You could still argue that some are around today. For example, Russian support of the Serbians in the 1990 Yugoslav Civil War shows that there still is cultural and religious connections. Okay, so now the reason why when we think about religion we're thinking about before 1648 is because obviously religion played a much bigger role in Europe. At that time it was much more influential. And so there's a reason why in this course we talked about it a lot at the beginning, and as it continued, we've discussed religion much less. And what is that term? In a word, what is the term that describes the decreasing influence of religion? Secularization. Exactly.
I thought it was anti-Semitism. No.
That's when you're against Jews.
So yeah, exactly. So in a word, one of the big trends we've seen over this course is secularization. And we see that with the Reformation sort of destroying the religious unity of Europe, science presenting an alternative to religious explanations for things, the Enlightenment requiring or having the expectation for evidence and empirical evidence for statements and assertions, skepticism towards religious claims, and as we move forward, these ideas become more influential, as well as the societal upheaval that is the Industrial Revolution, people moving from their traditional peasant towns, villages, to urban cities that don't have the same amount of churches available because of their rapid increase. And so therefore entire generations in the 1800s that will be raised without that close connection to their religious identity. And so the result of this will be a secular trend over the course of this class. And so it should be easy to see, oh, okay, all of these things, it's not just politics changing, no longer wars of religion. It's not just religious ideas being challenged by science, but it's also, socioeconomic changes as well that are all sort of contributing to this trend. Okay, so the background of the Reformation. Now, obviously we talked about the Middle Ages. The Catholic Church is the dominant religious institution, and during the Middle Ages there are tensions between the, just put it right there. There are tensions between the church and the civil authorities, right? This question is who ultimately has sovereignty, and Pope Boniface VIII, with the Unum Sanctum, argues that the church has spiritual authority, and that spiritual authority ultimately trumps the political authorities. Okay, so what does this mean? This means there's tensions between Boniface and the French king. And in the aftermath of the Unum Sanctum, after Boniface dies, the next pope, who's afraid of the French, decides to move to Avignon. And this begins the Avignon papacy, which is also called the Babylonian captivity. And it's called the Babylonian captivity because for opponents of the Pope in Avignon, it's viewed as the French king capturing the Pope, similar to how the Babylonians had enslaved the Hebrews. So in the aftermath of this, then there are two popes elected later, a generation later, and these two popes, this leads to the Great Schism, and so there's true popes, each claiming ultimate authority, and this undermines the authority of the church over people, because many people don't know which one to follow, and each one is calling the other one the Antichrist, and each one is raising money for its own endeavors in Rome or in Avignon, and so there's a lot of fundraising going on, and so it's during this time that we see the increase in the sale of indulgences to raise money for these different popes. And so there's a lot of backlash against this division called the Great Schism, and that backlash is known, the formal backlash amongst church officials is the conciliar movement, this effort to have church councils that trump the Pope. Now these church councils are basically made up of the leading bishops and cardinals of the church, as well as theologians that would come together and meet. So one example is the Council of Pisa, which attempts to end the Great Schism, but it just adds another pope to the mix, and so then there's three popes, and then of course the Council of Constance. And the Council of Constance gets all three popes, it deposes all three popes, and then replaces those three with one pope. And so now we have a conciliar movement of church councils, and many in that conciliar movement feel that the councils should trump the Pope. But the Pope obviously doesn't like that. And so what we'll see is ongoing tensions between these councils and the Pope. The Pope ultimately emerges victorious, and one of the reasons why is because he's a central figure who can make quick decisions, similar to that age-old sort of tensions, at least in America, between the legislature, the Congress, which has multiple members, and the president, who has one. We've seen similarly the sort of president emerges more powerful, and the Pope is able to, be a singular figure, and therefore sort of have the authority that comes with being alone in a position. Now, there is resistance also not just amongst formal church authorities in the conciliar movement, but amongst reformers. John Wycliffe in England, who begins to argue that the church is not necessary, and some of these church requirements, for example, that individuals go and receive sacraments and receive confession, some of these requirements are not, in fact, necessary for salvation. And John Huss, who also argues that the church needs reforming, that the church is too much a part of the elite's culture and needs to be opened up and made more accessible to the common man. Another example of this resistance to this sort of very powerful church institution within the Catholic movement is the Brethren of the Common Life. And the Brethren of the Common Life, led by Gerard Groot, is this movement of lay people, non-clerics. So they're not religious nuns or brothers or priests, but they're non-clerics that will meet and live a certain life, and live a life that's devoted to Christ. And so this is an example of a spiritual Catholic movement happening before the Reformation that's not as dependent on the church itself. It's a spiritual movement of lay people outside of the formal church hierarchy. And of course, this idea of reforms being necessary within the church, as well as that individual focus that we see with the modern devotion or the Brethren of the Common Life, that idea that individuals can be spiritually aware and interact or pray directly with God. It's sort of often termed mysticism. The mysticism of the Brethren of the Common Life. These ideas are taken up by Erasmus.